You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by NACS. Whether it's for food, fuel, drinks, or snacks, about half the U.S. population shops at a convenience store every day. We'll talk about what we see at stores and what the future may hold for our industry.
Usually Halloween is the scariest day every October. This year it might be the second scariest day because there's something happening on October 1st that affects every retailer, potentially every customer. We're going to talk about whether that means tricks or treats for you on October 1st and why. So today we're going to talk about EMV. EMV relates to standards and what's going on with new things that are coming at the pumps that are requirements this October 1st. My name's Jeff Lenard with NACS.
And I'm Carolyn Schnare, also at NACS.
And joining us by phone today is Linda Toth. She's the Director of Standards at Connexus, and just as important, she represents the industry for EMV, and that's what we're going to talk about today. What is EMV, why it matters, and what's going on. A little bit of breaking news, too. So welcome, Linda.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Carolyn. It's good to be here.
So for those not familiar with EMV, can you give us the elevator speech of what it is and what is happening related to this October 1st, 2020 deadline?
Sure. So EMV stands for EuroPay, MasterCard, and Visa. And they were the original companies that created the EMV specification. That specification is maintained today by EMV Co., which actually is made up of 6 card brands. It's MasterCard, Visa, Amex, and Discover, which you're probably familiar with in the U.S., and then also JCB and China Union Pay. And this new specification has the specification is for a chip card, and this card has a mini processor right on the card itself, along with some memory. And so this card can actually be used to read and write data back to the card, interact with the terminal. And the way that the data is read out, it's actually dipped or inserted into the card reader. And so there's a lot more data that can be gotten out of the card. So instead of being static, meaning that every time you read it, it's the same thing, it actually changes over time. So it's much more secure.
So, Linda, this is the card with the little gold chip on it, not instead of the mag stripe.
That's correct.
Or in addition to sometimes.
That's what we mean by that's what we mean by the chip. And so come October 1st of 2020, all of the merchants with automated fuel dispensers, or AFDs, are going to be required to have EMV processing capabilities or face some liability. And what that means is that counterfeit fraud, which makes up about 90% of the fraud at AFDs, the merchant's going to be responsible for. So counterfeit fraud is where the consumer still has the card in their wallet, but somebody else has duplicated that information onto another card and is trying to use it. So again, that makes up about 90% of the fraud. There is quite a bit of fraud out there. Connexus actually went to the 4 U.S. card brands to try to figure out what kind of fraud we were talking about. They came back, 3 of the 4 card brands actually reported fraud data to us for counterfeit at the AFDs, and they did that for 2018 and part of 2019, so we were able to calculate how much fraud was out there. In 2018, we were looking at $299 million in fraud out at the AFDs for counterfeit fraud. That is increasing about 23% year over year. So by the time we're looking at 2020, when this liability happens, our industry is going to be facing about $451 million in counterfeit fraud. Oof. So that means as a merchant, if you haven't upgraded, then you're going to be sharing in part of that $451 million. So anybody that's not upgraded, counterfeit fraud, they're going to be responsible for.
So the key thing is you'll still be able to sell fuel. That's not going to change on October 1st. But what will change is you are on the hook for liability now, and you've done some calculations looking at essentially ROI. What is the payback? Obviously, there is a cost to upgrade your pumps to have EMV compliance, and it probably is going to increase as the year goes on, as there's more people who want it in a shorter time frame. But it's important to do this from the simple ROI calculation in that the cost of fraud that you will be paying will be greater over not that long a period of time.
Oh, absolutely. So if you think about it, as more and more people come online, it's a simple division exercise. So as more and more people come online, those people no longer are part of that pool. So as the pool of non-EMV sites gets smaller, then their portion of that fraud is bigger. It's just like a pie. If you're trying to serve many people, they all get smaller pieces. If you're trying to serve just a handful of people, then they get much larger pieces. So those stores that haven't upgraded to EMV, they're going to be sharing in, getting a lot of that $451 million in fraud at their stores. And just because they haven't seen fraud today doesn't mean that they're not going to tomorrow. We know that the fraudsters on October 1 aren't going to wake up and suddenly change career paths. They're going to be looking for ways to, continue to do the fraud. And so they're going to look for non-EMV enabled sites, whether that's in the middle of the country or next door. So just because people haven't seen fraud today doesn't mean that they won't tomorrow.
So one of the big buzzwords in the news lately is skimming, and people getting skimmed at a gas pump. And I mean, if you're on a corner and you've got competitors across the street and that person gets hit by a skimming device and some consumers get noisy about it, they're only saying corner of Main and Fifth that I got skimmed, don't go to that gas station. They're possibly not saying which one it is. So this is a way of the whole industry is getting better. It's incumbent on everybody doing this so that we're all clean. That's how I'm starting to see it anyway.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So what happens is, the fraudsters today are trying to skim off what's on the mag stripe, right? So as sites go EMV, they're less attractive to skimmers. But at the sites that haven't gone EMV, they're very attractive because they're like the last way for them to get that data off the mag stripe card. So when fraudsters are looking, to do their craft, they're going to target, the non-EMV sites both to skim data as well as commit fraud. So absolutely, the EMV sites are much more secure. Visa has some stats that are public that EMV really does work. There's from September of 2015 through Q1 of 2019, the counterfeit fraud decreased on EMV-enabled terminals by 87%. So remember that back in 2015, October of 2015, all of the, inside the convenience stores as well as retail in general had their liability shifted. So the only thing that's remaining is the AFD fraud the AFD liability shift for October 1 of 2020.
And I'm glad you mentioned that because, and the reason it was shifted was the pumps are a little bit more complicated. There's more of them. But retailers, having gone through the process where it has been delayed once, and there's been some noise out there and some rumors that, well, will it get delayed again? Because there's still a lot of work to happen. Can you give us any insights as to whether this is a hard deadline or it might shift?
Yeah, so there are a lot of rumors going around that they're going to move it again, and absolutely they will not. The Merchant Advisory Group, MAG, actually, they represent retailers of all sizes and industries. They actually requested from Visa and MasterCard another delay, considering that we weren't going to be prepared by October 1, 2020. And both Visa and MasterCard confirmed that they will not be delaying this again. So the MAG put out a press release on that, and you can read the article in NACS Daily from the beginning of December of 2019. There's a NACS Daily article that pointed to the press release. So we will not be seeing another delay. There are a significant amount of merchants out there that have solutions available that they're deploying. So we know that it's possible. There are a good number of people that don't have solutions yet. And they're not going to be ready by October of 2020. But I think it's incumbent upon the merchants to do whatever they can to make sure that, they install their hardware early so that, if they don't have the software available, they're ready to go as soon as that hits. You want to make sure that you've done your site surveys to understand what kind of equipment you're going to need, whether it's, you need to replace your dispensers, whether you can do a retrofit kit on your dispensers. You may have to pull permits depending on your location and whether or not you need to break concrete to install something new or new wiring. You want to make sure that you have your technicians lined up. As we get closer and closer to the liability shift, technician availability is just going to be even tougher. We're already seeing, lead times of 6-8 weeks in certain areas. That will definitely increase. Over the winter months, a lot of work cannot be done, so that puts even more pressure, on the months that we can do work. As far as availability of technicians, we're hearing some pretty wild stories. Things like, technicians offering their services on eBay, for example, to the highest bidder. So merchants just want to be cognizant of all of the things that are required to get ready for the EMV implementation and make sure that they take steps ahead of time to be ready for that.
And uncertainty really can make somebody, whatever it is, a little bit more complacent. I'm really not sure what to do because I really don't know what will the liability, will the October 1 event stay as October 1? You've told us it will. At the other end, I think there's a little uncertainty or rumors that you hear that, well, this is just going to be a Band-Aid. We're going to have to do the X in another few years anyway. That's going to be even more of a cost, and it's going to make whatever we're working on now somewhat redundant. Can you give us as much certainty as you have about what the future may hold over the next couple of years? Will this be a stair step to something else, or is this going to be something that most likely will last a few years?
Well, if I had a crystal ball, I'd probably not be working here anymore. I'd probably have won the lottery. But quite frankly, I don't think merchants can afford to wait. We did a EMV preparedness survey. Connexus did an EMV preparedness survey last summer, June, July timeframe of 2019. And there were quite a few people, about 17% of our respondents said that they were undecided about what to do. They weren't certain that they were going to upgrade because of the cost and also the risk potentially not justifying the expense. But the sad fact is that if you wait until after the liability shift and you're hit with a lot of chargebacks, you may not be able to then afford to do your upgrades. It's imperative that you decide what you're going to do ahead of time and put that plan in place. You can't afford to potentially throw away money on chargebacks because you will never recover that. And all it takes is one or two bad incidents. We're hearing from some of the authorities that one of the more popular frauds right now is taking a skid truck with, like a bladder tank in the back and just standing at one of the dispensers with a bunch of white cards that are counterfeit fraud or that are counterfeit cards and committing fraud by pumping that bladder truck full of fuel and then selling that on the black market. So one or two incidents like that could wipe out your business. So it's very important that you take that into account and understand that $451 million in counterfeit liability fraud could be coming your way if you don't. Now, in terms of what happens after this, so, security is oftentimes a layered approach. It's not a one-size-fits-all. There's certainly other factors that could go into making sites more secure and payments more secure in general. Things like point-to-point encryption. Today, that's not required. I know that PCI is working on some point-to-point standards. At some time, that may be required. It's not required today. But that would add on to what's already in place with EMV. So I don't see having to throw away what you've currently, deployed or what you're going to deploy in the next couple of years. EMV Co. had been talking about doing a new revision of the EMV code spec that could require new terminals. For now, that has been squashed, and the current way of doing the EMV specification will remain. So I think it's pretty safe to go ahead and upgrade your set because, again, you don't want to be caught with chargebacks come October.
So on October 2nd, after this deadline passes and somebody hasn't done anything, the pumps are still going to work, correct?
Yes.
You can still dispense gas. You can still accept credit cards. You can still do everything. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear to listeners. It'll still work. You can still go there. If you still have to swipe your card, it's gonna still dispense fuel. You don't have to have. What if you don't have? This is another question too. What if you don't have a chip card? I think everybody. I think all of mine are now. But does everybody have chip-enabled cards?
So not everybody. There are still some cards that are Max Stripe only, especially like some of the fleet cards are still Max Stripe only. In that case, if the card does not have EMV capability, the merchant would not be liable for that if it's fraud. So basically, come October 1, the liability shifts to the party in the payment chain that has the least secure technology. So think about, in this case, the card isn't EMV enabled, so the card is the least secure, so that would go to the issuer or remain with the issuer. Mm-hmm. As long as the merchant has EMV capable terminals, the card is the least secure.
Good to know. And so you could still pay in store. You could still pay, probably anyway, and with cash.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And as you pointed out, the pumps are still going to work. Consumers can still come in and pump gas even with a Max Stripe card. It's just if there is a fraudster trying to use a counterfeit or lost and stolen card, you're going to be out on the hook for that.
So for those who have been through something that may sound a little similar, Y2K. Y2K was a huge run-up and all these dire scenarios of the banking system may not work, the fueling system may not work, all these things may happen, and nothing did. Nothing of significance. Maybe there were isolated incidents. I guess what we'd like to stress is the difference between this and Y2K is Y2K was concerned about a system. This is a concern about bad guys continuing to be bad guys after a deadline passes. And it's a much different scenario, as you said earlier. Bad guys aren't going to go, oh, I better find a sale on suits because I got to get myself a real job. Bad guys
Orange suits.
Orange suits, perhaps, yes. But the idea is, in something like this, fraudsters find weak points in the system, and weak points, if they exist, will be exploited. And whatever that per terminal charge right now, per dispenser chargeback is, it could accelerate rapidly. And the timing, if you're looking at budgets, October is the end of the year. That's not the time of the year that you want to see unexpected expenses. So want to stay ahead of this. We know that the cost of dispenser upgrades are somewhere in that $6,000 to $10,000 range, but the ROI is worth it. Yes.
Per dispenser. So, I mean, if you've got 2, 4, 6, 8, it adds up.
Yes. If you're Buc-ee's and have 100.
Well, yeah, that adds up a lot.
So is there, when you look at folks who are, say, a smaller company, and I was joking about Buc-ee's, they have 120 fueling locations, so you're looking at upwards of 60 dispensers in a place like that. But if you're a smaller operator and you don't have a whole lot of internal resources, what is the first thing that you would want to do? Who do you reach out to? Do you reach out to whoever is currently, which pumps you currently use? Is there a specific person or place that you should start?
Yeah, so you should, if you're branded, certainly reach out to your major oil. If you are independent, you could reach out to your distributor or your jobber. And in some cases, there have been packages put together to entice you to maybe upgrade or, replace dispensers rather than upgrade depending on the age of the equipment. Really, you need to do that site survey. Get your distributor or, out there to help you do that site survey to figure out what you need. Reach out to, if you're branded again, reach out to your major oil. In some cases, they're offering special financing. If you need to finance this, all of the finance companies in our industry are willing to work with you to do the EMV upgrades. So it's really important that you put a plan, in place on how you're going to do this, how much it's going to cost, how you're going to finance it. Reach out to resources. If you have a particular vendor that you work with directly in terms of whether it's your dispenser, your POS, your EPS, you can talk to them. Again, I know that a lot of vendors were offering packages to get, to have some savings and to entice people to upgrade early. As we get closer and closer to the 2020 deadline, those things will start disappearing. So it's important to get this in place early.
And you said, besides like right away, which is probably the best answer, whenever you're listening to this, go do that right now. You mentioned it could take 6-8 weeks to get on a vendor calendar to do things like that. But I've heard as much as 4 to 6 months it could take to really get the entire your entire lot upgraded. Is that about accurate? So that'd be April.
Yeah, absolutely. So, till you do the site survey and then you figure out what you need to purchase. If you've got any kind of wiring upgrades and you need to break concrete, you're going to have to get a permit. We've heard in some areas that those permits are taking quite a while to get. So you've got, permits, wiring. Now you're going to have to schedule and you've got to order the equipment. The equipment has to come in. Then you've got to schedule those technicians to come out and actually install it. And that's where those technicians right now are running between 6 and 8 weeks. Lead time on that. So, you've got hardware installed and you've got software upgrades, whether that's, with the POS, the EPS, both. So there's quite a bit of things that have to happen from start to finish. And again, like you said, Carolyn, that can take anywhere from 4 to 6 months.
Well, Linda, there's a lot that people have to look into. We have some resources available. I know you can go to nacsmagazine.com, and we've got December 2019 cover story article, which is really informative. Talks about these dates, talks about costs and some of the other things that could delay you or not. It's called Ready or Not. So if listeners would like to go check that out, nacsmagazine.com. Can you tell us other ways they can get in touch with you to learn more through Connexus?
Absolutely. So we have a EMV resource page out on our website at connexus.org, CONEXXUS.org. Again, if you go there, you go to resources and then you click on EMV resources. There is a great white paper out there that collects a lot of the resources from the industry and some other organizations all in one place. So that paper by topic breaks down. If you're interested in learning about this, here's a great link to a paper. Here's a great link to a webinar. So that's a good one to look at. If you're curious about EMV preparedness in general for our industry, we have the summer of 2019 survey results available on that website page as well. We also do a number of webinars. We did 2 webinars the beginning of December of 2019. Part 1, we had somebody from Verifone as well as Visa talking about the basics of EMV as well as just fraud in general. And then part 2 of that webinar series was the dispenser manufacturers and retrofit kit manufacturers talking about practical things you need to consider when you're going to upgrade and just good information about what's available in terms of the dispensers and what you need to do.
Well, we're certainly not short on information, that's for sure. I think there's plenty of things that we have out there to help you. And if you have questions, you can. There's a contact us area right on conveniencematters.com. Send it to there. We'll make sure that it gets over to Linda or Connexus or any of the experts we have on staff that can certainly help you get where you go. And also tell us your stories. Tell us how it worked for you, if it was easy, if it was hard, if it was challenging, and why you upgraded. So use that contact us button and talk to us. We'd love to hear from you. So Linda, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for telling us, walking us all through that. And thank you so much for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.